Hi, my name is Miss Jordan, and I'd like to welcome you to Cumberland County's Summer Edition. I will be reading with you a text, okay? So, we're going to read a text and answer some comprehension questions. All right, first things first, go to your packet and pull out Space Vacation, and you'll need a pencil. Okay, let's get started, all right? I'm excited to share the story with you. Before we begin, what I want you to do is I want you to look through the text and see if you can, with your parent or with a friend, see if you can predict and come up with what you think this text is going to be about. There are several little hints to help you out. Look at the title, look at the photograph, look at the caption, and see if you could come up with what you think this text is going to be about. All right? What do you think? All right. Just judging from it, the title gives you a hint. All right. The next thing we want to do, we want to look through our text, and many times there might be vocabulary that you're not familiar with, or you may have heard of the vocabulary and still not sure about what the word means. So when I come across words I don't know, I go through and I underline them so we can talk about it, okay? So I've underlined a couple of my words, and we're going to discuss them. That always helps with text that I'm not familiar with. The first word is atmosphere. Atmosphere. Atmosphere is an envelope or an area of gases surrounding the Earth or another planet. Atmosphere. So that's going to be an envelope or area of gases surrounding the Earth or another planet. Next word that will be in our text, tourist. Tourist. A person who is traveling or visiting a place for pleasure or for fun. Tourist. A person who is traveling or visiting a place for pleasure or fun. Next word, astronauts. You may have heard of astronauts, but I wanted to give you the correct definition. A person who is trained to travel in space in a spacecraft. Astronauts, a person who is trained or persons who are trained to travel in space in a spacecraft. Astronauts. Last one, radiation. It's an energy that moves from one place to another. Okay, radiation. All right, let's get started with our story. Now, there's several ways that you can read your text. You can read it with your parents. You can read it with a brother or sister, an auntie, an uncle. You can read it by yourself. You can read it with your parents together. You can take turns reading. There's all different kinds of ways. All right. So let's get started. I'm going to start reading. And as I read, one of the things that you can do, you can look at the comprehension questions to help you get in mind what the text is going to be about. Or as we read, once you know what the questions are going to be about, you can start filling out in your head what the answers are. Now, these type of questions are more of complete the questions, okay? So I'll give you a hint. So right now, what I'm going to read are more the topic, and then we'll answer the questions at the end. Ready? Question number 1, and we're going to complete this. Traveling to space will be, and so we're going to complete that. So right now we know our text is going to be more about traveling in space. Question number 2, while in outer space, is it likely that people will, and we're going to find out why they're traveling in space. Number 3, is it probably so expensive to travel in space? Number 4, this passage is fiction, nonfiction, a biography or a poem. And the final question, number 5, why are space travelers exposed to more radiation? Aha, radiation is one of our key words. So now we're going to read our text. So as I read, you can read along with me. Okay, so here we go. Space vacation. Outer space, a nice place to visit. Where will you go on your next vacation? Disneyland, SeaWorld, outer space. That's right, tourists are now paying big bucks to travel into space with astronauts. The first space tourist was Dennis Tito, an American businessman in 2001. He paid $20 million to ride on a Russian rocket to the International Space Station. The space station circles 220 miles above Earth. Tito stayed on the station for a week, hanging out with astronauts and eating space food. Another space tourist was Anusha Anasi, an Iranian-born woman from the United States. Now, boys and girls, we're going to go back through and try to pronounce her name correctly. So we're going to go back to another space tourist was Anusha Anasari, an Iranian-born woman from the United States who went to the space station in mid-September 2006. How safe is space travel? Apart from the risk of crashing, space tourists have some special things to worry about. Earth's atmosphere protects us from dangerous radiation from the sun. Space travelers are exposed to more of the sun's rays, but for tourists spending only a few days or weeks in space, the radiation probably isn't harmful. A bigger problem might be space sickness. Without Earth's gravity to protect them, to hold them down, visitors to space station float around inside the craft. It may look like fun on TV, but it can make first-time space travelers dizzy and sick. Luckily, the sickness wears off quickly. Then space tourists can enjoy their trip and the amazing view of Earth. All right, now let's pull out our questions. Now, these are complete, or you're going to answer the end of the statement. So there are more statements that we're going to complete and then a few questions at the end. Ready? Let's get started. Traveling to space. A, will be available to everyone. B, is not expensive. C, will be limited to the very poor. Or D, will be limited to the very wealthy. I was going to say rich. So when we don't know the answer, or just to check our answers, we're going to go back to our text and look for our answer. So we're trying to figure out traveling to space. Will it be available to everyone? That's A. B, not expensive. C, limited to the very poor. Or D, will be limited to the very rich. So I'm going to go back to the first paragraph, and I'm going to read that, and then we can come up with our answer. That's right, tourists are now paying big bucks to travel into space with astronauts. The first space tourist was Dennis Tito, an American businessman. In 2001, he paid $20 million to ride on a Russian rocket to the international space travel. There's our answer. So, A, traveling to space. A, will be available to everyone. No. B, is not expensive. Well, we already know that it is. C, will be limited to the very poor. Or D, will be limited to the very wealthy. So our answer for number 1 is D. Okay, now let's move on to number 2. While in outer space, is it likely that people will A, not need spacesuits, B, make side trips to Mars, C, get a sunburn, or D, experience motion sickness? Again, go back to our text if we're not sure. Number 3, is it probably so expensive to travel to space because, you're going to complete the statement, astronauts want to make a lot of money? That's A. B, astronaut food is very expensive. C, space equipment and fuel is expensive. D, there are high taxes on space travel. And number 4, now we're moving to number 4. This passage is A, fiction, B, nonfiction, C, a biography, or D, a poem. What is this text? Okay, last question. Why are space travelers exposed to more radiation? Go back to your text and look, okay? Any questions? Now, here's a good thing to do when you finish up. Now would be a good time to reread your text one more time and check your answers. All right. I hope you've enjoyed reading this text, Space Vacation.